remotely, and here we are. So this is brought to you by Monica Hallis in the Greater Boston Legal Services, and of course the members of the Labor Guild. The membership is in their donations. So we'll put these things together. We're going to be putting on a series in February of workshops on different items. You might want to check our website, and our classes will begin on March 8th in our regular spring semester. So with that said, I want to welcome everyone. Like I said, I hope everyone can benefit from this workshop, and we feel it's a real public service. That's why we offered it at no cost. We think it's vital to everyone. And Monica, thank you so much for doing this for us. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dave. And thank you so much to the Labor Guild, to Dave, to Mary, to Joe for hosting this workshop. Before I begin, I'd like to give a shout out to my amazing colleagues at Greater Boston Legal Services who do remarkable work representing unemployed workers. They've helped close to 4,000 folks since the pandemic began, just on unemployment issues. So really amazing. Also want to thank our brothers and sisters in labor, particularly the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, who has similarly been working so hard to help unemployed workers. And finally, I need to dedicate this workshop to our dear colleague, Brian Flynn, who passed away right before Thanksgiving. He was an unemployment worker warrior. He created so many positive changes in the unemployment laws, and we redouble all our efforts in his memory. So with that, if you bear with my technological lack of skills, I will bring up the PowerPoint for tonight. And there we go. So, so this is a lot of information I'm going to give you. And the other thank you that I want to do at the outset is to so many of you in the audience who sent in really fabulous questions. And it's based on a lot of those questions that this workshop has been created to hopefully answer them. There's new programs that I will talk about, continuation of older programs. So thank you for your questions, and look forward to getting even more of them. So what I'm going to talk about today are the unemployment programs available during the pandemic, as well as new rules, and also basically discuss regular UI, who is eligible, the benefits, the additional programs you can get once you've used up regular UI, and then the pandemic unemployment assistance program, those benefits, and how you apply for these programs, continue eligibility, and how you sleuth, as my wonderful colleagues, Audrey and Hannah at GBLS say, how you sleuth to prevent problems, how you decide whether to appeal a regular UI denial or apply for pandemic unemployment assistance, the additional benefits that are available to increase your weekly benefit amount, what's available if you're on leave, and what other resources there are to get help. So first of all, the basics. As we know, the unemployment system is a program of the Great Depression, thanks to Francis Perkins, President Roosevelt, Secretary of Labor. It's a joint federal state program in the Social Security Act, administered on the federal side by the Department of Labor, and soon to be, hopefully, our very own Marty Walsh as the Secretary of Labor, and on the state side, the Department of Unemployment Assistance, or DUA. There are two concepts that come up all the time in unemployment, and that is the base period, which is roughly the year before you apply for unemployment, and the benefit year, the 1 year after you apply. Generally speaking, you cannot turn down suitable work. You have to be able and available for work, and you have to do work search. But all of these requirements have been modified during the pandemic, initially under the Families First Act, the first major pandemic piece of legislation in March, and then expanded along with new programs and enhanced benefits through the CARES Act, and most recently signed on December 27th, the Continued Assistance Act. So what are the eligibility requirements for regular UI? You have to show that you are attached to the labor market. And you do that by showing that in that base period, the year before you applied, you earned $5,400 in gross W-2 wages. And that's up from $5,100 in the prior year. And your total earnings have to equal or exceed 30 times what is your computed weekly benefit amount. The base period is either the last 4 completed calendar quarters, or if you're not eligible using that base period, you can use your most recent income, which is not in a completed calendar quarter. So for example, if you're applying on March 20th, you would not be in that complete first calendar quarter of January 1st till the end of March. But if you needed to, you could use that income plus the prior 3 calendar quarters to become eligible for unemployment or to get a 10% higher amount. You have to have lost work through no fault, and that includes reasons related to COVID that we'll discuss. You must be a citizen, or if you're a non-citizen, you have to have work authorization and a valid social security number. You cannot apply if you're undocumented, and you cannot apply with an ITIN, the Independent Taxpayer Identification Number. And you have to certify on a weekly basis that you're still unemployed. So what are your benefits under regular UI? You get 26 weeks or less based on a formula, or more if you're working part-time because you're drawing down more slowly a total benefit credit. And I've given you the website on how to determine the amount of benefits and the duration of benefits. Your weekly benefit amount is essentially 1/2 of your weekly wages up to a maximum of $855. That changes every year, plus a $25 per week dependency allowance per child, up to 50% of your weekly benefit amount. As stated, this is administered by the Department of Unemployment Assistance, and you access this through UI Online that I'll talk about in English, or if you do not speak English, through this phone number, which will be repeated many times. So if you're filing a new regular UI claim, you need a desktop computer. So think about that in this pandemic. Or a smartphone tablet for a Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Haitian Creole application. The UI Online application itself is not mobile friendly. As I said, you have to have a desktop computer, and the application form in the various languages are mobile friendly, but they are standalone application forms. They're not incorporated into the rest of the UI Online system. So consequently, if you don't speak English, you need to choose mail rather than continuing through UI Online. Otherwise, you will be confronted with an English-only system. So you apply by creating an online account, or if you have received unemployment in the past, you'll need to remember your password. So that's the first hurdle. A lot of people forget. You can reset that password through a verification code option that requires your access to email or phone, your prior email that you used. You have to give your date of birth and answer a security question, which you also hopefully remember. And if this doesn't work, you can call DUA at 877-626-6800. That's the number that's going to repeat throughout. If you are applying online, would really recommend that you go through DUA's training PowerPoint. The link is here so that you see all of the steps that have to be taken in the application. In addition to applying, you're not done. Unfortunately, you have to keep certifying every week that you are still eligible. And online, the certification is only in English. You can set up certification by telephone or telecert with a PIN. And I've linked the instructions for creating a telecert PIN. It will also require a security answer and instructions about how to reset the password or again, contact DUA. The instructions for telecert are available in 13 languages. However, the actual telecert lines are only in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Cantonese. So one of the things you have to do when you certify weekly is you have to report any earnings that you've had. So the question immediately arises, can you work and collect unemployment? And the answer is yes, depending on what your earnings are. Your earnings up to 1/3 of your weekly benefit amount are disregarded, so they will not be deducted. But if you're after that point, they are deducted dollar for dollar from your weekly benefit amount. And if your earnings equal or are more than 133% of your to any more benefits. And the extra federal benefits that people will get, and I will describe those later, unfortunately do not count for purposes of figuring out that earnings, that 1/3 earnings disregard. So an issue that has reared its ugly head, has become a huge problem, is as a result of fraud scams that have been perpetrated, resulting in millions and millions of dollars of unemployment benefits going to people who are not entitled to them. As a result, the unemployment agency has created all these identity verification procedures that people now have to go through. And what you have to produce is essentially government issued documents that show your name and social security number, that have an official picture, that have your name and birth date. And often problems arise when the documents people have do not reflect their current address. So if that's an issue, you have to provide, in addition to all of this, proof of address. And all of these documents can be uploaded in the UI online screen under monetary and issue summary. You need to upload the front and back of every document, and unfortunately, only PDF documents are accepted. And to make matters worse, very often the functions that are needed on UI Online in the monetary and issue summary link are missing. So if that's the case, you have to submit the documents by calling DUA at 877-626-6800. In addition to proving identity, if you are not a citizen, you have to establish that you have a work authorization. And these documents are reviewed by the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements process, or SAVE. And I give you that name because when you're uploading documents, you have to upload them through the save issue, and who knows what that is, right? You'd have to find the save issue under the monetary and eligibility summary. Again, front and back of documents, PDFs only. And what you need to produce, I've given you the link to the entire list, but essentially it's a document that proves both your work identity and your identification, known as the category A. Or if you don't have one of those documents, you can provide a document establishing your identity plus a document establishing work authorization. So a slide created by Audrey Richardson and Hannah Tanavi from my office, who, by the way, run the UI claims program, which has helped those thousands of people, and also all the other folks in the employment law unit have contributed. to all of this, but there are so many times when things just go wrong, when people's claims are suddenly stopped or they don't know why they've been denied. And the way to figure it out, or one way to begin to figure it out, is to go to the home page, to the inbox, and first see, are there any notices or are there any questionnaires that are needing a response? And while you're there, check and make sure that all the wages from all the employers you worked for in the prior year have been included. And then go to the view and maintain account information and look at that monetary issues in summary, because that will let you see the status of any monetary determinations and look for other issues. Very often, pending issues there cause a hold on benefits or even result in a denial of benefits. So that monetary issues in summary link is really key. Make sure that the weeks claimed are there to make, and that weekly benefits have been requested and the status of the payments. And once your basic eligibility is established, make sure that you or the individual you're helping is certifying on a weekly basis. The dependent information place will also show you if all the dependents you have are properly identified. So one of the questions that was asked is, can you get back benefits? And in the regular unemployment system, that's known as a predate. What a predate means is that you were actually unemployed on one date, but you applied later. And so the question is, how can you get that effective date of claim? If you're filing online, you can get a predate by 1 week. But if you need a longer predate, or you need to explain your reason for a predate, you need to call DUA. The grounds for predate include that your employer, who is required by law to give you notice about applying for unemployment, failed to do so, or your employer or the unemployment agency for some reason discouraged you from filing a claim. You have a compelling reason, such as illness or death in the family or COVID-related reason, and that's why you didn't apply right away. You had difficulty applying because of limited English proficiency, or you had technical difficulties, or otherwise just couldn't complete the claim. And this is very different from missing weeks, that you, for some reason, didn't get all the weeks that you were entitled to. This is more about, did you get benefits from the first time that you were eligible? In other words, that you were unemployed. So there are some new rules, thankfully, for regular UI because of COVID. First of all, you are eligible under COVID if your workplace has shut down or hours reduced or temporarily laid off due to COVID. If your workplace had shut down pre-COVID, you would also be eligible. However, pre-COVID, you have to accept suitable work, and you have to have good cause to refuse work, and you have to do a work search and prove that you've done so. Under new rules, COVID rules, work is not suitable, and you have good cause for refusing it if the job poses, if you have a reasonable belief, so it can't be way out there, it has to be reasonable, but you have a reasonable belief that the job poses a substantial risk to your health or safety, or compromises your health due to your age, 65 or over, or an underlying medical or other condition. And importantly, this is a huge way in which the COVID rules differ from pre-COVID, is that it also includes a substantial risk to the health and safety of your child, your immediate family, or someone in your household. Another reason new to COVID is you can't work because you have to care full-time for an individual, either due to their age, they're elderly, or they're young, or their medical or other condition or infirmity, and no other care is available, including there is no in-person full-time school for the individual. Plus, and this is a rule for regular UI in COVID, even if there is in-person full-time school available to your child, if your child has a mental or physical health issue or an inability to wear masks and for that reason cannot attend school, or if that child went to school and would pose a risk, a COVID risk to you or a family member, or the school itself is not following the requisite safety guidelines, those are all considered COVID-related reasons for getting unemployment. Recently, we've discovered that DUA takes the position that even with all of this, if you can't do anything at all, for example, you're in the hospital because of COVID and you're comatose, then you would not be eligible for unemployment. So that's to be continued, but I just wanted to warn you about that one exception. All right. So for many folks at this point, because this is COVID has been going on for what, 10 months now, many people have already used up the term that the unemployment agency uses is exhausts, and it really is exhausting all of this, but you've exhausted all of your regular UI. So then what? There are 3 federal programs that are available. One is the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Comp Program, or PEUC, and that's a total of 24 weeks. Another is the Extended Benefit Program, or EB, and the third is once PUC and EB have been used up, you may be eligible for up to 57 weeks of Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA. All of these programs have a stop date and they have different requirements. So I'm going to go through each of them now. So first of all, PEUC. As stated, you've used up all your regular UI. Under the prior law, CARES, in 2020, you got 13 weeks of PEUC added on. Now that's increased to 24 weeks. And the extra 11 weeks, they're calling it PEUC 2.0, can only be claimed on or after December 27th. That's the date that Trump signed the Continuation Act. And if you're still getting PEUC on March 13th of this year and you haven't used up your 24 weeks, you can keep getting it until April 10th. That March 13th to April 10th period is called the phase out period. And that I'll give you the significance of that in a minute. So remember the benefit year, base period benefit year. So when your benefit year ends, in other words, when it's been 52 weeks after you first applied for regular UI, what DUA is required to do by law is do a look back and see, did you have any earnings in that prior 52-week period that are enough for you to establish a new claim for regular UI? And chances are, because during that 52-week period, you were either working part-time because you were getting benefits and you can't get benefits if you're working too much, or you were on and off unemployment during that period, the new weekly benefit amount is going to be a lot lower. And that's a big shock for people. They're going along getting benefits at one amount and then suddenly the amount reduces. We were able to get a fix for that under federal law in this one situation. If your weekly benefit amount that has now is the new amount that's been recalculated at the end of your benefit year is lower by at least $25, you can choose to continue on PEUC on that higher weekly benefit amount. So that's important. Now that provision has not yet been implemented by DUA because they're scrambling to stand up all these new programs, and this is one of them. But I wanted you to be aware of it, and hopefully it will be online shortly. So that's PEUC. The next program is Extended Benefits, or EB. So extended benefits, unlike the other programs I'm talking about, didn't just come about during the pandemic. It's actually a permanent federal state program. It's been around since 1970. And it provides for extra weeks of benefits. The term that's used is it's triggered on when unemployment is high. But eligibility, unlike PEUC, that you just continue to get once your regular UI is done, the eligibility for EB is not automatic. You have to fulfill two requirements. One is that your benefit year, remember that 52 weeks after you applied for regular UI, ended on or after May 10th of 2020, because that's when EB triggered on. So what that means in essence is that you have applied for regular UI anytime on or after May 11th of 2019. So that's requirement number one. Requirement number two is during the base period, the 1 year before you applied for regular UI, you worked at least 20 weeks. And you can prove that 20-week work in 3 ways. And it's awful that I have to go through this with you because it's just so much. But anyway, bear with me. The 3 ways are: 1, your total earnings were greater than 40 times your weekly benefit amount. And that's because, remember, the weekly benefit amount is essentially half of your paycheck. So 40 gets you to 20 weeks of work, right? Or your total earnings were equal to or greater than 1.5 times your highest quarter earnings in that base period. If you don't meet either of those tests, you can prove by submitting documents that you actually worked for 20 weeks. And you do that by submitting paycheck stubs or deposits, etc. Okay. So hopefully you've met those 2 convoluted tests for EB, and you're able to get used up or exhausted your UI benefits and your PEUC. There's one hiccup to that rule, and that is if you're on EB right before the new law was passed, so December 26th, or signed, excuse me, you have to complete your EB, and then you get the additional 11 weeks on PEUC. So what are you eligible for? You get up to 20 weeks. And the reason that I say up to and not just 20 weeks is the number of weeks of EB you get is 80% of the number of weeks you got regular UI. So if you got the full 26 weeks of regular UI, 80% of that is 20 weeks. If you only got 20 weeks of regular UI, then you would get 16 weeks of EB. And the benefits can be claimed during periods of high unemployment until at least March 13th. And depending on the unemployment rate, these benefits may be available longer. So there has always traditionally been a tougher work search standard, at least on paper, that if you're getting EB, you have to prove that you have been looking for work. And that language appears still when people apply for EB, but people are not being denied because of work search in COVID right now. So we're hoping that the language changes because when you're on EB, the language is pretty frightening. It says, unless you're going to prove weekly work search, you're not going to get benefits anymore. So just to warn you about that. Okay, so we've talked about regular UI going to PEUC and going to EB. Finally, if you've exhausted all these programs, or let's say you weren't even eligible for EB, so you exhausted them earlier, and big emphasis on the word and, you are unemployed for a reason directly caused by COVID, then you're eligible potentially for PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. Right now, the other hiccup is that if you're on PUA already, you're going to be made to stop PUA and reopen your PEUC claim and get the additional 11 weeks. So last year, the total number of PUA weeks was 46. Like the other programs, there's been an 11-week addition, so the total has been increased to 57 weeks. And those 11 extra weeks only can be collected for unemployment on or after the date of signing, December 27th. When you're looking at the 57-week total, any week you got regular UI or EB is subtracted from that 57-week total, but the weeks on PEUC are not. So again, there's the same time limitation. However, if you can get PUA until March 13th, 2021, if you're still collecting and still have weeks available, that continues until April 10th. So who is eligible for PUA? So PUA is a little bit complicated to get one's head around because it's both a potential add-on to people who have exhausted regular UI, but it's also a totally new program in and of itself. So there are two groups who are covered under PUA. The first is the group we've been talking about, people who have used up their UI, their EB, and their PEUC, or they didn't earn enough. They didn't earn that $5,400 in their base period, or they didn't work long enough to get unemployment, or they were denied regular UI for a whole variety of reasons. If you are denied regular UI, you can appeal, but under certain circumstances, rather than appealing, you can apply for PUA. And again, the critical feature of PUA is you have to be unemployed for a reason directly related to COVID. So the second group is the new, really new group of people who are covered. And this is really terrific because for the first time, there's been a recognition that all workers, if they don't have work, should be getting relief in the form of unemployment benefits. So for the first time ever, self-employed workers, independent contractors, gig workers, freelance workers are eligible for PUA. And in Massachusetts, for the first time, clergy and all workers in religious institutions, so that includes the janitors of a church, anybody working for a religious institution, and full-time college or high school students who lost their part-time jobs due to pandemic, they are eligible as well. So these are new eligibility criteria, new groups of workers who are able to get relief during this pandemic. Now, getting it, of course, can't be simple, right? So what happens is, if you earned $5,400, remember that's the magic number that gets you in the door of regular UI in terms of gross W-2 income in the prior year, and you go and apply for PUA, you are blocked in the PUA application form. You get a little message, you can't apply here, go apply for regular UI. So what you need to do is apply for regular UI get denied, and then go back and apply for PUA. And the reason that works then is you will be checking off a box that says, I was denied regular UI, and that unblocks the application. It overrides that $5,400 requirement. Okay, so then should you appeal a denial of regular UI or should you apply for PUA? I mean, this is just general advice. One has to know what the circumstances are in greater detail, but just generally speaking, again, if you earned $5,400 in gross W-2 earnings, you have to apply for regular UI. You can apply for PUA after a UI denial if and only if you have a COVID-related reason. And as we described, you're not eligible for regular UI because you're a gig worker, independent contractor, clergy, worker for a religious institution, or student who works part-time. Another reason to go to PUA is if you had really low W-2 earnings. And we'll describe what you get on PUA, but you get at least a minimum of $267 a week. Another reason is if you had low, I mean, for the whole year, you had about 5,400 and not much more in W-2 earnings, but you had a lot of 1099 earnings. So for example, a musician who has a part-time job teaching gets W-2 wages of about 5,500 the prior year, but most of that musician's income comes from gigs, which are 1099 payments. That person is better off if they didn't earn that 5,400, better off on PUA. Folks who are not eligible for EB will get more on PUA, and you are avoiding long delays of appeals. It's easier to get back benefits, and PUA is 100% federal funded. So quite frankly, employers are not involved in the decision at all. So this is the most important slide with respect to PUA, because it tells you the reasons you can go ahead and apply for PUA. And these reasons have to apply precisely. There's no reasonable belief like there is in regular UI or other ways of getting around this. These are the criteria that are set out in the statute. They're put in the application. And unfortunately, there's no wiggle room. So here they are. If you've been diagnosed with or you're having symptoms of COVID, or a member of your family, immediate family living with you or household has been diagnosed with COVID. If you're providing care for a household or family member with COVID. If a child or another person in your care has no care or school due to COVID. And with school, again, it has to be full-time in-person school, but there's not the additional criteria that what if your child can't attend a full-time in-person school. You can't reach your place of work. And what they mean by you can't reach is that the place is in quarantine or the workplace has closed due to a lack of work due to COVID. If you're that self-employed or independent contractor who's now newly eligible for benefits, your work has to have been severely limited due to COVID. And then the catch-all that you've quit your job, you've been laid off, or your hours have been reduced as a direct result of COVID. So all of those reasons presume that you have that labor market attachment, that you've worked before. There are two instances where you don't need a work history at all. One is if the head of household has died as a result of COVID, and you now have to provide the family's major support, or you're scheduled to start a new job, but that job offer was withdrawn due to COVID. So what do you get on PUA? The minimum benefit is 267 weeks up to 57 weeks. And as we said, benefits last until April 10th. Again, if you were collecting on March 13th and still had some weeks available to you. To be eligible for PUA and to increase that $267 amount, you have to provide proof of earnings or self-employment through showing W-2 forms, 1099s during the prior year. And it's good to do that as soon as possible because that 267 a week can go up to as high as 855, the same maximum as under regular UI plus dependency allowance. And like regular UI, you have to be a citizen, or if a non-citizen, you have to provide an A number and eventually work authorization documents. And there's simply no eligibility, unfortunately, if you're undocumented or have an ITIN rather than a valid Social Security number. So there is a new rule for PUA that is important to know about for folks who've already been on PUA. The rule is that you have to prove, not just for purposes of increasing your benefit amount, but for purposes of eligibility, you have to prove that you had employment or self-employment by a certain deadline, unless you had good cause. And if you don't, you will be charged with an overpayment claim of the entire amount of PUA. So if you applied before January 31st, you have 90 days to provide that proof. And if you apply on or after January 31st, you have 21 days to provide that proof. Again, if you have good cause to extend these, you can. So that's the new eligibility rule. And we're concerned because it is challenging to prove employment or self-employment sometimes, that this could be result in overpayments. Separate point, you can claim back benefits to the first date that you were impacted by COVID. So if you applied for PUA before the new enactment, so on or before December 27th, and you were impacted by COVID, you can go all the way back to February 2nd of 2020. As long as on February 2nd, 2020, you were already being impacted by COVID. So that's important to know because that's a huge back pay amount. And if you're, and it could cover times where there are extra benefits available. And I'll explain that in a minute. If you've applied for PUA after December 27th, you can only go back to December 6th, even if you were impacted by COVID before that. The one way around that is if you applied for regular UI before December 27th and you were denied, the application date for regular UI can be treated as the application date for PUA. So that's another way to get back benefits. So how do you apply for this PUA? You apply at this website, mass.gov/PUA. It's a much simpler, mobile-friendly application, much easier to maneuver than the UI online for regular UI. However, it still requires an email address for username. You can also apply by phone. And if in fact you're a high school student under 18 who lost a part-time job, you have to apply by phone. It's available in English and Spanish. There's key documents that are also translated in Spanish. And it's a good idea to have documents available even if you don't have to upload them in the initial application. So earnings records, dependency information, your A number, and the bank routing and account number for direct deposit. I should have included that under regular UI as well. If you provide that, you get the benefits much more quickly. The alternative, if you don't provide that, is you get a debit card and it takes a while to receive it. So how do you certify weekly for PUA? Again, you have to certify and report your earnings, and there's a 1/3 disregard with a dollar for dollar deduction. So if you're receiving the minimum of $267, once your earnings are more than $89, which is 1/3 of the $267, you get a dollar for dollar deduction. And if your earnings are more than $356, which is 133% of your weekly benefit amount, you won't be able to receive any benefits. So that's another reason why it's important to show your prior earnings to increase that 267, because that will increase the amount of earnings you can have without the deductions. And you have to certify weekly that, but for one of the COVID reasons I gave on the very important slide, that you can't do work. So to certify online, I've given you the link. The English is the default setting. You can do this in Spanish. You have to remember to go to the top right-hand corner before you log in order to get the Spanish version. You can also certify by phone, and that's available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Cantonese. So once again, my colleagues have figured out how to sleuth the application to figure out what's going on. And you can log into the account. If you're a helper doing it for somebody, there is now a 2-factor verification system, but you can be entered as a trusted account so that you don't have to go through that every time. Again, the home page is critical to look at to see if there are any fact-finding links requesting information. Sometimes those links disappear, and if you haven't provided the information, you're denied and you don't know why. So be sure and check all of the notices from DUA. We've given you links to some sample work authorization, notice denial, sample ID verification denial, and a sample notice indicating that the claim, the UI claim is active. And again, the ID verification is very important and is resulting in a lot of denials or holds on claims. So this is the link to the instructions in terms of verifying identification. And as always, if this doesn't work, you call the DUA number. Oops. Okay, so during the pandemic, in addition to whatever your weekly benefit amount is, you get extra weekly benefits. So right now, what is available is an extra $300 a week from the period of December 27th to March 13th. So it's not available in that phase out period that I talked to you about from March 14th to April 10th. In addition, that mixed earner unemployment comp for folks who had low W-2 income, had higher 1099 income, those folks can get an extra $100 if they're on any program except PUA, as long as they can show that in the year before they applied for regular UI, they had $5,000 or more in 1099 income. And that will be available as well from December 27th to March 13th, not during the phase out period. I want to tell you, just remind you what people got before, in case people are getting retroactive benefits, they'll be able to capture these additional monies as well. And that's the $600 that was available from March 29th to July 25th. So if you're getting back benefits, you'll get that extra $600 a week for that period. You may recall there was an extra $300 of lost wages assistance, but that came from FEMA, and there's no more money there for back benefits. Under the Biden plan, what our understanding is that there will be an extra $400 a week, which will last until September. So hopefully all those rules about March, ending in March, will go by the wayside. So what if you're on leave due to COVID? Pre-COVID, if you were on leave, you did not qualify for unemployment benefits because you were considered not to be separated from work. But now you can get unemployment benefits on regular UI, whether the leave was initiated by the employer or whether by you, if the work is not suitable and if you're refusing any work for good cause, the reasons that we discussed. You can also get PUA if you're on leave, as long as the reason is directly related to COVID, for one of those reasons on the really important slide. If you do get pay while on leave, you're not eligible for unemployment or PUA unless that pay is much, much less than your regular wages. And just a reminder, we don't have time to talk about it now, but paid leave is available if you qualify under the Massachusetts Earned Sick Time Law. And as of January 1st, there's a new Massachusetts Paid Family Medical Leave Law. You may recall that there were federal paid sick leave. Those ended on December 31st, but the Biden plan is to re-up these programs and actually improve them and extend them. So finally, in response to some of the excellent questions that were sent in, I just want to touch on a few other issues. As I mentioned, what's become critical is the ability to prove your identity because of the fraud hack. And a lot of people's claims are being put on hold. So make sure that all the required documents have been uploaded. DUA just last week, I think it was, sent out 75,000 letters to regular UI claimants with a PIN. And we really urge you to reply immediately so that the verification of your claim can go more quickly. On the other hand, you have to watch out for fraud scams. Never provide personal identifying information in response to an email or text from an unknown source. We've heard repeatedly that it's often difficult when you're trying to call DUA to get through, and we found that the best time is first thing in the morning. And then all of this information that I've presented, I know it's overload and I apologize, but there's so many issues that arise involving the interplay of regular UI, EB, PEUC. So to help figure it out, look in your account, in your UI online account, to see what is active. And then click on the blue hyperlinks, and that will enable you to sort by program, by status, and you'll get a better sense of what's going on. And finally, what is available of all the things that I discussed at this very point in time is the extra benefits in PUA, so those extra 11 weeks, the $300 extra FPUC, or that weekly enhancement, and the other programs are still being added to the system, such as the PEUC and the mixed earner system. So additional resources, we try in legal services to post fact sheets, etc., at this Mass Legal Services website. It also has lots of other COVID-19 related information. To find a local legal aid office, go to Mass Legal Help. The landing page for the unemployment agency is mass.gov unemployment. And the Office of the Attorney General has lots of excellent advice on their website, including unsafe working conditions, a hotline, and information about childcare, and the earned sick time law that I mentioned. The new paid family medical leave law, you can find out about that at the mass.gov PFML website. And MassCosh has done an amazing job on worker health and safety issues, and they have a wonderful worker safety toolkit. And then finally, as I mentioned at the outset, we're so lucky to have the help of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO and their rapid response team that has helped so many unemployed workers. And Bob Bauer and John Drinkwater have very graciously provided me with the permission to list their phone numbers. So in closing on this part, again, these slides are general advice only. They're not legal advice, and they're only good to today because there's constantly new guidelines and information coming out. So if there's time, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hi, Maya. First, let me say thank you. That was wonderful. We can do a virtual round of applause with reactions if we'd like. We do have a couple of questions, and I've tried to group a few of them together, but I'll go in a rough order. If someone is temporarily laid off or furloughed, do they still need to certify and accept another job, even if it means that they will not be able to respond, if they will not be able to respond to a back to work call, should they take that other job?
So at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a separate set of rules about folks who were on a temporary furlough. And the rule there was, as long as you keep in touch with your employer, you're satisfying the work search requirements. I think that rule went by the wayside only because it was not re-upped, but that's certainly still a good concept. In terms of whether you are required to accept work, again, it depends if you're on regular UI or on PUA. And under regular UI, remember the work has to be suitable and you need to have good cause to refuse it. And on PUA, you can refuse the work if one of the COVID-related reasons apply.
Thank you. We have another couple of questions on PUA overpayment. Two people have asked about a waiver. One person asked generally, is there a waiver for PUA overpayment? And another person has asked if there's a waiver that resulted from an identification issue, other than waiting for an appeal.
So first of all, on waiver, really glad you asked that question, because now under the Continued Assistance Act, for the first time, waivers are possible in PUA. And you can get a waiver if the overpayment was not your fault and it was against equity and good conscience. And what that means is that you relied on that money and you did things with it that you would not have done had you not received it. So the important distinction there is we're not talking about the use of money for ordinary living expenses, which is of course what everybody uses it for, but is there something, can you point to something out of the ordinary that you did? For example, you paid off a debt, or you had a child who needed money and you gave that child money. So you relied on that money to your detriment. And there's another aspect of equity and good conscience that just flew out of my mind. Relied to your detriment, and you relinquished a valuable right. So for example, if you didn't have unemployment, you would have gone on welfare and you would have been eligible for welfare. But because you went on unemployment, you did not get the welfare benefits. So that's the other aspect of that criteria. On regular UI, there has always been in Massachusetts law the possibility of getting a waiver for an overpayment. And in addition to that equity and good conscience standard, there's also another standard that says it's against the purposes of the benefits. And what that translates into is that you are somebody who really needs those benefits and you can't afford to pay them back. Your current expenses exceed your income. So that was the first question. Now the second question, can you repeat that, Joe?
Yes. The second waiver related question had to do with specifically for someone who the overpayment request resulted from an ID identification issue. And they were wondering if there's a way to waive that without going through the appeal hearing.
So the overpayment came about probably because the person did not provide identification in a timely manner, I'm guessing. And they've been told that now that it's an overpayment. And the question is, do they have to go through an appeal? So they do have to get to the point where they have proved to the agency that they are who they say they are. In terms of overpayments and waivers in the current PUA, there are no waivers. There is a waiver possibility, but they haven't implemented the waiver options. And they are also not actively charging anybody with an overpayment. But if somebody has an identity verification issue, yes, that person should absolutely go to an appeal hearing to get that resolved. I hope that answers the question.
I hope so as well. Next, we have a couple of questions about the DUA call center. So people are specifically asking if certifying work is done through for PUA through the phone. Is it an all automatic, like automated system that you reach, or is it the call center? And if someone does try to get in contact with the call center but gets the automated system, is there a way of reaching a person at the other end instead of an automated system? So kind of call center related questions there.
Yeah. So I should probably ask one of my wonderful colleagues if they are on. Audrey may know this, or Hannah, if she is on the call center, just how it operates. But generally speaking, if there's a difficulty getting through to the call center, which is not unusual, and folks are trying to get through or trying to resolve a problem, one of the things we suggest is that individual contact their state representative or state senator. Those folks, their staff, have a direct line into the Department of Unemployment Assistance and can sometimes help when there's a logjam. But I don't know, Audrey, if you wanted to add anything to the call center question.
Just the question of getting through.
If it's automatic, yeah.
It's just the folks' experience is that it's incredibly inconsistent. There's no rhyme or reason to when and how to get through, quite honestly. And it seems to change constantly. So I think probably persistence and repetitiveness is frankly what people need to do.
I see we have a state rep on the Zoom who's offering to say what their office does.
Okay. Am I still? No, okay, I'm not muted now. Yes, we get quite a few requests like that. We're pretty good at it now. The response is not fast. It's got to be probably a month before we get an answer, but we do always get an answer. Now, the smart thing to do is go to MA Legislature .gov, and you can find my legislator. That under the list of legislators, find my legislator, because you have to be one of my constituents or whoever it is, and that'll tell you who you can contact. We need to know. Send an email is best. You can call if you want to know how it works, but we mess up the details if you call. Send an email. We need the phone number to call you back on, your address, the claim number, dates. Our email is not secure, but most people will give us the last 4 of your social. And we do these daily. We do quite a few daily. We're pretty good at it. That's not the thing we wanted to be good at, but we are.
Thank you so much, Representative. We really appreciate what all the folks at the State House have been doing to help their constituents, because the demand really is overwhelming.
Yes, thank you. We have quite a few questions relating to if someone got unemployment benefits for the first year or the first 6 months, but now are trying to seek PUA. Could you speak a little bit more to what that would look like for someone?
Okay, so again, it depends on the form of unemployment the individual was on in the first place. So if the individual was on regular UI, then there is PEUC that now up to 24-week extension, possibly extended benefits. And if all of that is exhausted, used up, then possibly pandemic unemployment assistance, as long as the reason was related to COVID-19.
Okay, thank you. I think that kind of talks about a couple of the issues that people have raised. I think some of them are a little bit more topical or scenario based, so I'll pass those along as well afterwards. There's a group of questions as well about specific areas. Does GBLFS or does anyone have any resources about specific areas or specific groups that people can contact, particularly in Berkshire County, or anyone that can help people with low tech skills or low English literacy skills?
Mm-hmm. So on the resource page, the legalhelp.org is the place to look for your local legal services office. I have to warn you, though, that after 10 months of COVID, many of our offices are just beyond capacity in terms of accepting new cases. In our office, we've handled close to 4,000 cases. And at this point, sadly, we cannot just take regular claims, but we are taking claims through various community-based organizations, particularly organizations that serve people who don't have desktop computers and who are limited English proficient. There's also the ABA website has a place to ask a lawyer as well. And again, if the issue, and Representative Hawkins, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but if the issue is one of just being stuck, there's no legal issue involved, but you're trying to move things along and you just can't get through, that's when we do advise people to contact their state rep or state senator.
Unmute me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, we don't mind at all. We do so many. It's not like we're exploring new territory. I think the only thing I didn't say is we can't give advice like you just did in the last presentation. That's totally out of our bailiwick. We're just good at sending in the requests and forwarding the accurate information. And I think what they like after doing this for the better part of a year is that we deal with less people. We deal with local people that we know, and it's somebody that you can call back and ask. We might not know anything, but we can say, no, we haven't heard. We track these. But I just want to be clear, we don't offer advice like you just did.
Right. I understand that. Thank you.
Another question about after 57 weeks of PUA, is there any way to extend beyond that?
Not now. However, we're very hopeful that the new administration is going to take a new look and help people who are still unemployed because of the pandemic.
Great. If someone is participating in a Section 30 program and they're receiving an additional $300, do they need to be conducting a work search?
So Section 30, for people who are unaware of what that refers to, is a provision of the unemployment law that allows you to get, this is pre-COVID, allows you to get extra benefits while you're participating in approved job training. And there's really two parts of it. One is that you're deemed to be able and available for work, even though you're not looking for work because you are in training. And the second is that you can get up to an additional 26 weeks of benefits after beyond what you get on regular UI. The one concern about being on the Section 30 extension now is that's called AB, additional benefits in federal law. And anybody on an AB program, which Section 30 is not entitled to the enhanced benefit. So right now, that person would not be able to get the extra $300 a week on top of what they're getting on unemployment. So we don't recommend that at this particular point in time, when there are so many other ways to get extended benefits, that that people pursue this. On the other hand, I think what's in the question as well, though, is what about my work search, et cetera? And it at least relieves me of looking for work. So then the question has to be, do I have a COVID-related reason? If I'm on regular UI, one of the reasons we've discussed, including the reasonable belief of harm, or if I'm on PUA, one of the reasons that was set out in the really important slide. If you have a COVID-related reason for being out of work, then there really is no reason to pursue the extended benefit under Section 30 because you won't get that additional money.
Thank you. We have another one about on and again, off again. So if someone lost their job due to COVID, received UI for 6 months, then got a temporary job and is now unemployed again, are they able to reapply to UI? And would the extension weeks just be automatically added on? Or is there something extra that needs to happen in order for that to take place?
So the person was, during the year, as I understand it, got 6 months of, so got the full amount of their regular unemployment and then worked. And if they worked so that they're beyond that initial benefit year, because that first time they got unemployment, that set up the benefit year for the next 12 months. So if they're beyond that benefit year, then there will be a look back to see if that person has enough earnings to establish a new benefit year, and that person would get regular UI, etc. If there wasn't enough earnings to establish a new benefit year, then that person would be eligible for the other extensions, the PEUC and the EB.
Thank you. We have another similar one. If someone received regular UI benefits for the last week of March and the first week of April, but didn't receive the additional 600 benefits of that were available at that time after being laid off due to COVID, is it possible to claim retroactively for those 2 weeks?
That's a good question. There should be. So they got benefits starting March 29th, or by saying last week. That's when it started. It was March 29th. So it sounds like there is a claim for retroactive benefits. Yeah.
Great. That one has already all been answered. And someone asks if they have to send in a work search now. They got a message to keep one. Wasn't sure if they needed to submit or just keep it in case they ask.
Right, right, that's that puzzling issue for us right now. So work search requirements are waived during the pandemic, we think, but we have also seen, particularly in the context of people on EB, the extended benefit, that they're getting these rather frightening notices that say, unless you show us what you've done for work search, your benefits could be stopped. So I guess the answer for that individual is yes, if you've done any work search, certainly put it down on a log in case you ever need it, but it should not be required right now.
Great. We have another that just came in on extra benefits. Do they have to fill out and keep the work search even if they're in a high risk category? So I'm on the same note as well.
So is this, did the person mean on extended benefits?
Yes,
Okay,
I believe so.
and high, I'm not sure what was, oh, you mean the reason is that, well, I'm putting words in the person's mouth. Can you just repeat the question? I'm sorry.
On extra benefits or extended benefits, do I fill out and keep the work search? And this person is high risk.
High risk of COVID, I see. Right.
Mhm.
So yes, that's the same issue. We don't understand why they are doing this with extended benefits and making people think that they have to fill out the forms. So when we get more information about that, we'll be able to answer the question better. But certainly under federal law and the federal guidelines that just came out since the signing of the Continuation Act on December 27th, the law on extended benefits is that states are entitled to continue to extend the same flexibilities as before. And by flexibility, that means being more flexible about actively looking for work and work search, et cetera. So technically speaking, I think folks should be okay, but I'm hesitant to just say that definitively because we're still in discussions with the agency about that.
Thank you. We have another question from the chat from a little bit ago regarding if the claim year has ended. Do extensions continue your claim, or do you have to reapply after in a new claim year?
Yeah.
If you haven't got enough work in 2020, get denied, and then do PUA?
So, right, this is the confusing thing about benefit years. At the end of the benefit year, the agency will do a look back and see if you're eligible for a new claim. If you are not, then you can continue on right away to PEUC and EB. So think of PEUC as this automatic extension to regular UI. And then EB is not quite as automatic. Remember, you had to meet those two requirements, but both of those programs are available. That's the point of them. When people run out of regular UI, those programs are there.
Great. Then we have a question that has just also come through. Someone had to apply for a back date, a prepay for March because someone had to apply in March because they thought that their claim went through in May. They were approved, but have been told, but it's been on hold since May. They've talked to a couple different people, and they said that they would hear from UE they haven't heard from someone. Is there a way to keep that moving?
Yeah, that's the kind of case that we would send up to the State House because, um, you know, the movement has stopped, and someone at DUA needs to take a special look at that and see why. So it's not a matter of legal advice, but rather just unblocking whatever has kept that case from moving. That's terrible that it's been pending since May.
Thank you. I hope that helps. I think we've gotten through all the questions that have been posted in the chat. Anyone else has any last questions? They can either use the raise hand function or post them. One more just came in. How stringent is the PUA eligibility that someone should have scheduled to start employment? If someone is laid off and rehired seasonally and verbally, but not formally scheduled to restart work before the pandemic hit, would they be eligible?
Oh, I see. That's a good question. So I think the question is saying what constitutes the withdrawal of a job offer for purposes of PUA. And I think that it would take a little work to prove it. You would want to show how in the past work was always available at X time and that you had an expectation for that work. You could show prior income coming in from that particular job. But this time, because of COVID, it just didn't happen. So I think absolutely that effort should be made.
Great, thank you. Another question has come in about the work search on the weekly claim. Is there a best way to answer that? Would that be done in the telecert? The question just asks, how do we answer the work search question on the weekly claim?
Oh, yes. If it's done through telecert, there, and we're talking about regular UI, there's actually on both, I believe, there's a set of instructions. So if you go to the Department of Unemployment Assistance landing page, that mass.gov/unemployment, it gives a lot of information and does give instructions on how to answer those telecert questions.
Great, thank you. I think that's someone has an overpayment issue on their claim. Is there a number to call? Is that the same number that is listed throughout that they'll
It is. That number is the number for everything. If there's an overpayment claim on a PUA account, just know that they're not doing anything with those because they haven't even uploaded how you can do a waiver of the overpayment. And don't forget that waiver possibility, and particularly for regular UI, well, for both really, but for regular UI, you have those two options of showing that you should get a waiver. Either it's, against the purpose of benefits or against equity and good conscience.
Great, thank you. And I think as we're closing down, we're just about out of time. So I want to say thank you, Monica. Thank you to everyone who helped answer questions, Audrey, Jim, and thank you to everyone who came tonight. This was a wonderful event, and we're very thankful for all this information. And yeah, you did a wonderful job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Great job.
Thank you, Jill. How many people were on the Zoom?
We had 130.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Amazing,
You did a
amazing,
great job.
amazing, Monica.
Oh, thank you. You're so sweet.
I don't know how you keep it. I just don't know. Wow.
Lots of great questions. Thank you. Thank you for hosting this again. Really appreciate it. We're trying to reach as many people as possible because it's so confusing. As you